We're going to talk a little bit about the top players in WAR for 2020, and then we're going to take a deep dive and touch on the untouchables, some of which you might have thought retired a decade ago, and some that appear to just be random objects from other sports. Anyway, here we go. So here are the finalists for 2020. This represents the perfect draft order based on value provided. Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook were in the top tier with WAR values close to 3, while Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill were worthy of top picks in the top half of round 1. Um, and then we have Travis Kelce, who I honestly couldn't even hate if you took him in the overall number 1 spot of drafts next year. I mean, the guy is just too consistent for words, and he's got one of the best QBs of all time. Looking at him on just about every other play not involving Tyreek Hill. Another surprise finding here, though, has to do with quarterback. Now, 4 quarterbacks were round 1 caliber in 2020, flying in the face of expert analysts suggesting to wait on quarterback in drafts. Now, it's very possible that 2020 was just a fluky season. Fantasy analysts J.J. Zacharyson and Sean Coroner have reportedly gained around a QB6 value in previous years by just streaming quarterbacks. But from what I gather in 2020, that wasn't the case. So take that with a grain of salt going into next year. But for 2020, the top quarterbacks in the league really helped you out. Okay, we'll move down here a little bit to the other rounds. Shout out Younghoe Koo for making it into the top 5 rounds, the best kicker of 2020. And here is some of the other names from the top scoring players. Let's just move a little bit further down the list here to a special place in hell in which T.Y. Hilton resides. Now, I'm totally not bitter about this, but T.Y. Hilton was hands down the troll of the year for 2020. Okay, this graph here was done for full PPR, but whatever. I plotted how many points he scored in each game, and then in the red labeled the percent of ESPN leagues who started him in each week. Now, as you can see, 75% of morons like me started him in week 1, and this dropped precipitously with each week, and every pathetic excuse for performance until finally it bottomed out at 10.5% there in week 12. Yeah, that's when TY decided to have a day, scoring over 15 points in PPR. His next 2 games were even better than the last, with over 20 points, but his start percentage never is 21%. Well, finally, after these 3 rock-solid weeks, as you can see, us Luddite fantasy managers finally decided it was time to forgive him and get back on that colt in week 15, when his start percentage more than doubled to 45%, and as you can see how that worked, pretty sick there, TY. Friendly reminder, don't at players, they do not. Let's move even further down the list here. I know I said class was over, but there is just a quick thing I want to show you. Kendall Hinton played 1 game of quarterback for the Broncos, and it did not go well. Minus 2.78 points. But what if I told you that there was a quarterback who also only played in 1 game in 2020, actually scored more points than Hinton, yet still somehow WAR knew was a worse player? Yes, that man has a name, and yes, it is Nathan Peterman. But wait, how could Peterman be lower on the list when they both played 1 game and Peterman clearly outscored Hinton? Well, if you notice to the right of Hinton, his yellow WAR bar is indicating that he was logged in ESPN's system as a wide receiver, not a quarterback, and that changes everything. Wide receivers aren't expected to score as much as quarterbacks, so Peterman's piddly point was worse for teams than if a wide receiver scored almost negative 3 points, as Hinton did. So really, this was kind of a system error, as Hinton really should have been logged as a quarterback. But it does provide a good lesson here that Ward is accounting for these positional differences. Okay, so here are the rest of the top 400 or so players to fully put on blast, and so that you have pretty much everyone conceivably imaginable included in this analysis. Um, oh, but wait, yeah, there is more. There's actually a lot more, and if you're more into the math and concept behind how war works and less into the petty humor, You probably should have ended this video a while ago. It's only going to get worse from here. We're going down into the Mariana Trench of fantasy football war. We have names here that have never before been captured on film until now, but it's Jacoby Brissette, a somewhat surprise name that came in a gentleman's 655th place here for 2020. That is selection number 7 of the 54th round of your fantasy football draft. So I actually want to check in on a newly discovered species here, and that is one Tim Boyle. Now, Timmy's report card for all 7 games in which he appeared, including his best performance of the year in which he did nothing, is here in black. And then if you look to the right, you'll see his rushing carries, which might make you think Trent Richardson decided to give his career another go. But as it turns out, I reviewed all 13 of Boyle's rushes, and Boyle wasn't even a running back. Quarterback Tim Boyle played for the Packers and, as it turns out, specialized in a very specific component of quarterbacking, taking knees. But as you can see, specialists with specific sets of skills like Timmy really shouldn't be expected to venture outside of that skill set by dropping back for a pass. As you can see there, it went for -8 yards with a fumble. But really, shame on the Packers for putting him in such a tough position. Okay, one final lesson to throw in here. Jacoby Brissette's 2020 numbers don't seem nearly as bad as a quarterback who doesn't throw, but to be honest, he didn't really either. It was strange seeing him come in sporadically through the games. I don't know, maybe Phillip Rivers had to take a call from one of his kids and yell at them, but whatever the reason was, we do have a lesson that we can take from these bad quarterback plays. So for Brissette, he played in 9 games versus only 7 for Boyle. Now, getting dud performances from a quarterback is disastrous in fantasy, but really terrible dud performances like Boyle's aren't really as bad if it involves less games than a regular terrible dud performance like Brissette. So, okay, one last thing here. I do want to show you what WAR looks like when we view it from a prorated method, as we kind of did with Christian McCaffrey. Now, no one was even close to McCaffrey on a game-for-game basis looking at WAR through this lens, and this could give you an idea of what to expect out of players who were injured for most of the year in 2020. So obviously this includes Christian McCaffrey, and then we got Dak Prescott and Joe Mixon are some of the top names. But just so you know, we also get some random names like Marcus Mariota here. Obviously, you're not going to expect him to do well after coming in for one game and looking like Joe Montana, but I don't know, who knows. Okay, moving down here, what you'll notice at the end, at the bottom of, this war list is wide receivers, kickers, and especially quarterbacks coming up as the bottom feeders. Now, I kind of explained why with quarterbacks. For kickers, there was one guy that was kind of interesting here. This guy all the way at the bottom, Jamie Gillen. Now, he was actually a punter, but he did attempt 1 field goal and missed in Week 16. He also had 1 rush in Week 1. That went for -2 yards, and he lost a fumble on it, securing him as a jack of no trade. So good job, Jamie, making the bottom of the list for kickers here. And even below him, we've got our usual suspects. We've got Kendall Hinton. We've got Jacoby Brissette again. There's Nate Peterman below both of those. Shocker, shocker. And as promised, we even have random equipment from other sports. But rounding off the list, we have Matt Schaub, a quarterback who I might have bet my life retired 8 years ago. But he actually played 1 game and went for -0.4 points, giving him the prorated crown for worst fantasy player of the year. All right, so there you have it. Version 2.0 of Fantasy Football War. Give me a follow on Twitter. I'll be doing a lot more war analysis and posting it on there now that I've rolled this out, along with some more humor columns, so look for that. Also, big thanks to Dynasty Nerds for giving me a place to write about fantasy football. And also thank you to Prezi for not canceling my student account 8 years after graduating. Really appreciate that. And also thank you T.Y. Hilton for being the troll of the year for 2020. I look forward to figuring out who will be next year's troll Remember, don't at players. So thank you all again, and I'll see you out there. I don't know what that means.